So, hi there everybody, it's 6 o'clock, so we're going to start our webinar. Welcome to the first Authors Train Authors webinar. My name's Richard and I'm the Audience Engagement Lead here at Tes. Primarily my role is to support authors in various ways, providing you with advice that you need. However, last September we made a decision that actually we can give you so much information, but some of the best information comes from our experienced authors. So we started our series of Authors Train Authors events, and we invited Nichola along with some other authors to give some advice at those events. So today we're joined by Nichola, whose guidance was very well received at the previous events, so that she could give this information out to you in webinar form to reach those of you that couldn't make the 2 live events that we've run so far. So Nichola, if you'd like to say a little about yourself.
Hi, I'm Nikki. My shop is nwilkin, and I was a teacher and head of department, and now I create resources full-time for computer science secondary mainly.
Okay, and please do feel free to post any questions that you have for Nichola in the comments at the side of this video. We appreciate that some of you may not be able to sign into YouTube, and if that's the case, then there is a link that's posted so that you can post the comments on a different page. You don't have to sign into that one. So my colleague Flora is going to be collecting those comments to hand over to us later on. I would like to emphasise that the questions that you ask are addressed to Nichola, making the most of her expertise as she's visiting us today. If you've got questions for Tes about the way that we run things, please email authors@tes.com and our customer service team will pick those up and forward them on to the relevant people. So I'm going to pass control over to Nichola, and we will make a start.
Thank you.
There we go. So we're going to start with talking about how you decide to charge for resources. So how do you decide on how much you charge for your resources?
Well, it can be quite tricky. You've got to think about how much it's worth to the customer, not how much it's worth to you, how long you put into creating it. So if the teacher can create something similar, might not be as good as yours, but that does the same job in 5 or 10 minutes, they're not going to pay £3 for your version. So you can't go charging an awful lot if it's something that's quite straightforward to create. But if it's something that's either very difficult because it's difficult subject matter, or it's something that would take a very long time to create, then that's where you can charge maybe a bit more for. But you also don't want to undersell yourself. So if we use some wine as an example, a subject close to my heart, if I was going to buy a bottle of wine, I wouldn't know which of these 3 bottles that I would want to buy. You can't smell it, you can't taste it, but all we've got is the shape of the bottle and the label. So bottle A is a bottle of white wine, bottle B is a bottle of cheery contentment, and a bottle C is Chateau de Vin. Obviously I made them up. You might also go on the price. So bottle A is £1.50, bottle B is £6.75, and bottle C is £432. In that situation, most of us would probably go for bottle B. We'd assume, rightly or wrongly, that bottle A, which is very underpriced, would taste like vinegar and it wouldn't be very appealing. And we do this all the time. So we judge things on the quality, on how much someone prices them. Most of us probably wouldn't go for bottle C because we wouldn't appreciate the nuances of it or whatever, and it's an awful lot of money. But most of us go for bottle B thinking that that's probably decent quality and an affordable price. So if you're trying to price your resources and you go for the bottom price all the time, then what you're advertising that as a bargain basement product, and that's not what people are looking for. If they're going to invest their own money or invest the school's money, then they want to invest in something that they think is going to be a better quality, and probably a better quality than they can create themselves. So don't just have a race for the bottom price. You're never going to win that. There's a lot of free resources on Tes. Go for something that you think is reasonable and reflects the quality of your resource.
Great, thank you very much. So with free resources then, what types of resources do you think should be free and why?
I think if we go back to the wine, then when you're going to buy your wine, If there was a bottle of something that you recognise that you've had before, you'd probably go back and buy that same thing again. People generally are creatures of habit. We go for what we recognise. So if someone in the supermarket is giving out free tastings, then we can see if we like it. It's giving us a taster to see if we like it, and a lot of people would end up buying that new brand, and that's what your freebies are doing on Tes. They're exposing people to your brand, your style of creating resources, but there's no point in creating a free thing which you don't create anything like that in your shop normally. You need to create your freebies that reflect accurately what your resources are that you're trying to sell. So if you sell entire units of work, then give away an entire unit of work. If you have if you sell individual lessons, give away whole lessons. If you only do worksheets, give away some of those worksheets. You can give away things that are just part of a resource, but it's got to be something that can be used in its entirety without buying something else. I hate it if I download a lesson and I get halfway through it and it says to use the rest of it you need to pay for it, because that just leaves a bad taste in your mouth about that particular author. You lose trust in them, so end up going against them. So if it's, for instance, a starter activity that would work well in someone else's lesson without the rest of yours, or might work well in an assembly, then by all means give that away as a freebie. But they've got to reflect what you normally would produce.
Excellent, thank you very much. So what do you think then makes a good title for a resource?
People forget that titles have got to do two things. They've got to tell the customers what your resource is about, but it's also got to help the search engine find your resource so teachers can make the decision whether to buy it or not. And so it's probably the search engine you need to think about most of all. If your resource is hidden on page 600, then it doesn't matter how good it is, no one's ever going to find it. So your titles have got to help it be found, and the way it works, I think, because Tes isn't telling me exactly, but from me juggling around over the last couple of years, I think it's a lot to do with what people type in that search bar. So you need to think about what people will actually be typing in to search for it. And in computer science, in my subject, we're quite unimaginative, and we tend to stick quite closely to the scheme of work from the exam board. So I use those a lot in my titles, and maybe some other subjects a bit more creative, and the teachers might be searching for other sort of keywords. But generally, when I've created my titles, keep them quite short. If you've got extra words, you're moving away from that search engine. It thinks you're slightly more irrelevant. It's not getting quite so close to match. Avoid cryptic or unusual wording. There's no point in being poetic at this point. You need to be quite straightforward. The teachers appreciate it, but also the search engine needs it because it needs to match as closely to what they're typing in. Put the most important words at the beginning, so instead of calling it a worksheet on binary, call it a binary worksheet, so that keyword is at the beginning. Avoid too much punctuation. People don't tend to put 6 exclamation marks at the end of their search results, so you're just moving further away. The only exception for that is the GCSE 9-1. That's quite a common search term that people type in, so that's fine to use. Also, at the end of a single question, you can use a question mark. But I wouldn't add too much punctuation apart from that. And avoid keyword stuffing. That's when people put in things like Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. It doesn't get you nearer the top, it actually moves you further away because no one's going to type in Halloween, Halloween, Halloween in the search bar in the first place. So don't keyword stuff, it just looks a bit naff.
So we have a couple of comments.
Sure.
There is a comment about price, which says it's also a good idea to look at what sells well within the resources you have already created. If it includes a lesson plan and 3 worksheets and sells well, then clearly teachers think it looks like good value.
Yeah. I mean, if you're trying to sell a 1-page worksheet, then it's probably not going to sell for £10-15, even if it took you 20 hours to create it. Because teachers, even if they might not create the same thing, they could create something similar that does the same job. But if it's a workbook which has got 80 pages in it, then you can charge a little bit more for that sort of thing.
Yeah. And there's one more comment saying best quality depends on teaching needs. Valuable things for someone can be useless in other educational systems. It's a pity.
Yeah, it might be in some countries things would work particularly well. I sell a lot to the UK, but I know some teachers specialise in the international qualifications. So what works for one might not work for someone else.
Absolutely, and I think it's important to remember that whenever a teaching resource is created, it's always created with a particular specification in mind. So things that are created in the UK for UK's curriculum may not be appropriate elsewhere in the world, and we would strongly encourage people from elsewhere in the world to make resources specifically for your curriculum, because there will be a market out there for that curriculum.
Yeah.
Shall we move on to the next bit? So what sort of information do you think authors should include in their resource descriptions then? So this is underneath the title.
Again, this has to perform two things. It's got to sell it to the teacher and tell them why your resource is brilliant and going to save them all this time, and how they can't live without it. But also, I'm sure the search engine searches the description, because when I put key phrases in the description, it seems to help move it higher up in the page rankings. Absolutely. In the results.
That's not something we hide.
So you need to put your keywords in there to try and help it get found. But it can't just be a list of keywords. It's got to be written in full sentences and make sense to teachers as well. So this is an example of a description that I use. So I've got a resource here called What is the Internet? I've included the title in that first paragraph as well. There's no harm in doing that, but if you've got an alternative title, if you weren't sure between two titles, then I would put the alternative in there. And also the keywords for me would be GCSE 9-1 computer science, so that's in there as well. And then the second paragraph is really selling it to the customer. It's telling the customer why this is a brilliant resource. Things like being slightly different than other resources that teachers might not necessarily be searching for, but as soon as they read about it, they think, oh, I can't live without that. That's the idea. So the fact that it's dyslexia friendly, there's lots of tasks in there. You include the lesson plan with the answers. Including the answers is a big plus point. People like the answers. So that second paragraph generally is selling. And then the third bit where I include almost like a table of contents. So it mops up all those extra keywords that people might have typed in. It also tells people exactly where the limitations of your resource is, so they're not confused thinking, oh, it's going to include this and it doesn't. So I include what is actually in there, because I create lots of different styles of resources. I also say that this is a one lesson, so they know it's not a whole unit of work. There's no confusion. You need to make it as clear as possible. And then I also like to include links to others of my resources. So they would normally be hyperlinks, the network types, network hardware. So you're linking to other resources and you're using it as a sales pitch there as well.
Absolutely, great. So we've now got the description, we've got the title, but we need some images to go with this. So we've got two different types of images that you're able to attach to a resource, but what's the difference between the cover and the preview image?
The main difference is when they are displayed to the teachers that are searching for them. The cover image is only displayed when they first type in some keywords and you get that first list of all the resources. And all that needs to do is persuade them to click on that resource and find out a bit more. That's all the cover needs to do. It's quite small. The preview is much more detailed, and that includes more about what's inside the resource, particularly if it's a zip file, because you don't get to see anything.
Okay. So, in that case, then, what do you think makes a good cover image then?
I think a good cover image, it's got to just persuade people to click on it to find out more. That's all it's got to do. And the way you do that is by telling people what your resource is about in the simplest way possible. So if you have a look at some different cover images, I just mocked these up because I didn't want to offend anyone. So these aren't genuine ones, but if I was searching for binary, for instance, I would have, this is the first 5 resources that might be displayed for me. So the first one is just a generic image that this author might use for every single one of their resources. It doesn't tell the customers really what's in it. It doesn't inspire them to find out more. The second one, the lesson about binary, this is where they've used a zip file. They've not included a cover or a preview at all, so you end up with this weird little mountain range. The third one is they've made an effort, but the title kind of gets lost. It's a bit too busy. Because these are quite small, then no one really understands what it's about. The fourth one, the binary revision worksheet, is probably the one that most people would click on. They would have scanned through the first three, discounted them, and then clicked on that binary revision worksheet because it's clearly saying what it's about. And the last one, there are so many of these. It's just a generic, slightly fuzzy, cropped image of part of the resource. It doesn't really inspire anyone. It doesn't sell it, especially when you're getting 20 of them looking all very similar. It's not making it stand out that this is really screaming what they want. So, yes. Sorry.
Very quick question. Will a recording of this webinar be available after?
Yes, it will. If you're not able to stay for the whole webinar, don't worry, there will be a recording of this available afterwards.
Great, thank you.
So I'll show you some of my cover images that I've created. Some people keep their cover images all looking the same. I get a bit bored, so I change them for each different range that I produce. So they all look the same for a range, so people can start collecting the whole range, but each range would have a different look. But there is a similar thing about all of my cover images, is they've got a great big title on them to tell people what it is, and then they've got a fairly generic image. It doesn't really matter too much because these are quite small, don't forget, but the title has got to be quite big, and I would recommend you put them in the top half of your image, because if it gets trimmed from the bottom, particularly if you don't put it as your featured,
yes.
Then they get trimmed from the bottom. So put your title in the top half and make it really huge. Apart from that, keep them quite simple.
For those that are wondering what a featured resource might be, this is something you can do in your shop on Tes. As an ability to feature some of your resources at the top of your shop. So that's what we mean by the term featured.
Yep.
I have a couple of statements. One of them is to make it clear how many pages a resource includes. Would you advise that?
It depends what sort of, in the description I guess they mean, it depends what sort of resource you're doing. I sometimes do, I wouldn't necessarily for a PowerPoint say this includes so many slides. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But if it's a workbook, I normally would, because people want to know if it's value for money.
And of course, some teachers have to consider printing costs and things in there, so they might want to know for those reasons. And I think it's a general idea of the length of a resource might sometimes be useful in the sense of whether it's just 1 page versus 100 pages.
Yeah.
Great. And I have a general one. What is the best practice for a new author? Possibly generally?
Yeah.
Well, hopefully, I think through this webinar, we'll give some of those tips away. And I think if we if we've got more general questions like that, we'll save them to the end of the webinar, and we'll talk about them then.
I would just say quickly on that one, you just need to create loads of resources. That's the only thing you can do. If you don't create resources, you've not got anything to sell.
So our next question then, we've talked about cover images, but we now have got to talk about preview images. So what do you think makes a good preview image?
Well, the preview image is when you actually get in to see the resource, and they might read the description or they might not. So some customers prefer to read the description, some just like to have a look at the preview. And if you're not including a preview, then they'll probably just come straight back out of your resource and look at something else. So it's got to tell people about what your resource contains. So this is a preview that I create. Especially if I do a zip file, then you don't get any sort of automatic preview. So it's a good idea to create your own preview, but it's also a good selling tool, and you're in control of what's displayed then. So I've got some screenshots of some of the slides in the presentation, so they know what's in that presentation. I say it includes a worksheet and a teacher's guide, and I'm saying the same sort of thing that's in that description, but it's just because some people don't always read the description, so it's another way of telling them exactly why your resources are the best.
Excellent. So it's all a very nice image, but how do you go about creating that kind of image?
It's actually quite straightforward. I create it using PowerPoint. So I create a 1-slide PowerPoint presentation. I can put the screenshots. You can do print screen on a Windows computer and paste that straight in. You can resize them, add shadows, add the text, and then you can save that as a JPEG file. If you go into File and Save As, you can save it as a JPEG. You don't need to use any other software for that. And then once you go into adding your resources, and you've actually added the resource, then there you go. You get a little box there, and you can upload the file that you've saved. In this one I just called it preview, but you would normally save it with a sensible name, being a computer science teacher. If you don't, then it's automatically set to default preview, and then you don't really have the control about what's shown. But sometimes I use the default preview if I want them to just see, for instance, my terms and conditions.
And that default preview, for those that are wondering, if you've got a long document, it searches out just a few pages of it to display, but it will pick those pages itself. So if you want to choose which pages it's showing, then you can use the custom version.
Yeah.
So are there other types of preview other than just that still image?
Yes, I create video previews as well. I used to just do them for my larger resources because I thought people wouldn't really be interested in them for smaller ones, but I've now started doing them for individual lessons because I was getting some questions from people. Even though the preview showed part of it, they wanted to know a bit more about what was included, and so I now just do a preview of my individual lessons as well, and they seem to be going down quite well. Once you've created your preview, then you need to save it to YouTube, and then what you would do is you would put the link to the YouTube video in that little box, click on add, and then it adds your resource as a new uploaded file. You don't get a preview for that because it just shows the video.
Yeah. Great. So now we've talked about creating the resource. What is the bundle function?
Bundle, if you create lots of resources that are all quite linked together, then you can bundle them together and offer them at a discount price. And this appeals to the collector mentality that teachers, well, everyone has. So if you create a lesson and a teacher really likes it, they're really likely to buy your other ones. But if they think that they're going to get a discount if they buy them all in one go, then that's what the bundle allows them to do. So I've got an example here. I've got 6 resources. You've got to have at least 2 premium, so paid for resources, but the others can be free, or they can have up to 20, I think it is, unless that's changed. Up to 20 resources altogether. So these are £3 each, apart from the freebie at the end. And I might think the first 3 are related somehow. Maybe that's for my lower ability resource. So I would bundle them together, and I would price that at less than the individual total price of the resources. So normally there'd be £9 if I bought them individually, but people would get a bargain if they bought them for £7, and that just persuades people to buy all 3 rather than just going for the one. Obviously the other half, maybe these are for the higher level tier, then because one of them's free, then the bundle price comes down, but that's not all you can do with the bundles. So you can put the same resource in more than one bundle. So if I was going to bundle the whole thing together, then that would be 12. I wouldn't reduce it an extra time. I'm not incredibly generous with my bundle prices. I think about 25% is about the most that I would go to. But I have seen people do 50%, but I think you're then verging on making it look like a cheaper resource. But it's up to you. It's a personal choice about how much of a discount you give.
Yeah. So how do you go about creating those bundles then?
You create them very easily, actually. You've got to create your resources first. You can't add to a growing bundle because any teachers that bought it before wouldn't just be able to download the extra new ones. So you wait until you've created all the resources that you want to put in the bundle. So a bit of planning ahead, really. And then you just click on this add resources to the bundle box. And then you just tick the ones that you want to add, and it helpfully tells you the total price for your bundle, so you don't need to do any maths yourself. Give it a bundle title and a description, just make it clear about what's included, and then you give it a new price, and it tells you what sort of discount that is. So as I say, 25% I normally would go for, and then add a cover image and then publish bundle.
Some people might be thinking at this point, looking at your pricing, that's a particularly high price. What do you reckon to that?
It sells at that price, so people are willing. This would cover at least a year's worth of work, and so teachers are willing to spend, because this is quite complicated workbooks in this bundle. So it's things that teachers wouldn't necessarily have time to create themselves. So that's why you can charge a little bit more, I think, if it's something slightly more complex.
And as you said earlier, of course, that you give some of these bits away for free, which gives people the taster of what is included in such an expensive bundle, which means that you know what you're buying when you're spending that much money.
Yeah, they've got a bit more confidence in it. Yeah.
Fantastic. So what options are there for giving discounts then and running sales?
You can give your own discount in sales, and they're called promotions in Tes. So you would choose promotions from the side, and then it says create new sale. You would add your resources by just ticking them, so you could do all of your resources on sale, or you could just choose a few. So if you're running a new range, you might want to just hook people in. Then you give it a sale name. That doesn't get seen by the customer at all. That's only for your reference later on if you want to see how well that sale's done. Choose your discount amount. It can be up to 25%, and the least amount is 5%. And then you've got to choose your start and end date. The start date can't be from today. You can't run it immediately. It's got to be from the midnight. So tomorrow would be the earliest that you could run that sale. And the end date is within 2 weeks of the start date. So if you're very good at planning ahead, you know you've got like a special holiday coming up, that you can run a sale to coincide with maybe the end of the school year or whatever it happens to be.
Mm-hmm.
But 2 weeks is the maximum, and what Tes will do is it will automatically reduce your price at that midnight. The price would go slightly bigger and orange, so it stands out. You get a little banner on your resource as well, so it stands out to people. You'll automatically take the discount off, and then after 2 weeks it'll automatically put it back to full price. You don't have to remember to do that yourself. All you've got to remember to do is promote it on social media, but that's a whole different webinar.
Fantastic. Well, thanks ever so much. So we're going to open up now to any further questions that people have. You've been sending some of them in as we've been talking. So just before we move on to those questions, I'd just like to let you all know that we do have the next Authors Train Authors live event taking place here in Sheffield on Saturday the 29th of June. If any of you would like to sign up to that, then you can go onto your dashboard, onto the Author Academy, onto lots of different areas of the site where you'll find the advertising for this, and you can sign up to the Eventbrite like you signed up to this webinar. So Flora, do we have any questions coming in?
We do. So we have one question which is asking about reviews. So the question is, how important are reviews, and how do you encourage buyers to come back and leave a review?
Some authors ask for reviews in the description. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I have done it on one. I don't tend to ask for reviews. Some people offer incentives, which is up to them if they want to, so they'd have to then follow that up and make sure that people are getting the freebie or whatever it is that they're offering. So you can do that. Otherwise, you just need to just wait for the reviews. I don't get an awful lot. I've had, I don't know, about 750,000 downloads, and
Wow.
I've had 700 odd reviews. So that's about 1 per 1,000.
So it's not a high percentage.
It's not a high percentage, no.
Great. Next one is about what terms and conditions do you put on your resources?
I'm quite lucky. My husband is a solicitor, so he's written a lovely set of terms and conditions for me. Mainly they are about how people can use them. So it's to tell people that they can't share them on their public website. They can't share them with friends in other schools. We took a great deal of time trying to phrase it because of academy chains, whether they could use it across the whole academy chain or whether it is just for one individual school. And I personally decided that I wanted it just for the purchasing institution, which is kind of the chain then, but it means that it can't go anywhere else.
Sure.
Yeah, so that's it really. And then obviously you've got GDPR these days as well.
So we do have the on all the resources that you upload. It does come with the paid license from Tes, and that license does say in some of the stipulations about how it can be shared beyond. So every purchaser who purchases the resource will have that visible to them when they purchase, so that they know how they can use that in the future. And that is especially true of free resources as well. Some authors are not happy to share free resources because they're worried about the licenses that go with them, but we do give you an option of 3 different free licenses that you can use, to make sure that you choose the right one for how you want that resource to be used.
Great. Where do you get your images from when you create your own resources?
Because I do this full time as a company, then I do either buy resources, I do occasionally, I create them. Because mine's computer science, then in my spare room I have bits of computer that I've taken apart, that I've taken pictures of, so I can do that, whereas understandably if you're doing geography it's a bit harder to maybe get the images from all around the world that you need. So I can take my own images. I've drawn images sometimes with varying levels of success, and I buy them. But you can also use things like Pixabay, but just check the individual rights on those, because it's not a generic thing for the whole site. So you need to check if you can use them in commercial situations.
Right. We have a user who's confused about downloads versus purchases. Why would they have 70 downloads versus 9 purchases?
So, I mean, there are ways that the site measures the purchases. So, if some of those are bundles, you will only get one purchase for a bundle, whereas every individual resource within that bundle that's been downloaded will count as a separate download. We do tend to see that teachers do come back again and again to download the same thing that they bought repeatedly. It might be that they bought it at home and then they need to download it in school as well as having it on their home computer. So that does boost the download numbers a lot higher than the purchase numbers. That's usually the reason that we see for that.
Great. And we have one more. Should you publish lots of free resources initially to build a customer basis and then charge for new editions?
I did. I started off with just free resources and built up my name that way, and then I started charging only 18 months, 2 years ago. But it's up to you really how you want to go. But the freebies certainly bring the customers in, so you need to have a fair few freebies that are good quality to get the customers getting to know you and get familiar with you.
What sort of percentage of your resources do you tend to have as free?
About 25%, just under now.
Right.
About 25% of my stuff's free. I normally try and bear in mind, one out of every 5, because I had so many freebies to start with, and
Sure.
I'm still trying to catch up.
Sure.
But yeah, 1 out of every 5 resources, I think that's free.
That gives a fair range of different things that the users can look through before they choose to buy any of your resources as well. So that's going to give a lot of insight into the quality of your work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I create a resource, I sometimes don't know whether it's going to be free or if it's going to be charged until I get to the end. So I create them for the same sort of quality level, whether it's free or not.
Great. Do we have any more questions coming in? We did have a couple that came in before the webinar, so I will switch over to find some of them. So I might be losing the image off the screen by doing this. One of them asked about expanding into a US store. So what do you know about the difference between the UK and the US store?
Years ago, Tes said, do you want to start a US store? And they kind of set it up for me, and I've never really done a lot with it, and my stuff sells in the UK and US, so if I upload a resource, as far as I can tell, it's available for everyone. If you're going for a particularly US based market, then you could maybe include that in your description or your title, so they know it's covering their standards that they use. But I don't really bother creating anything particularly for the US market or trying to break into the US market. If they buy it from there, then I'm happy.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, we did used to have on the website a difference between US and UK stores, but actually now all the database of resources is just as searchable in the UK as it is in the US. So you wouldn't have to worry about creating a different set of resources for the US. They will all be visible in just the same way. You may want to adapt some of your resources to be suitable for the US curriculum. That would make sense, but you don't have to worry about how visible your resources are in different countries. So another couple of questions that we had here. Do you have any advice on seasonal resources and what resources sell at which times of year?
Oh yeah, this really came to light this week, because until a week ago all my resources that were selling were just revision resources. Every single thing that I was selling had the word revision in the title, and then that stopped overnight once the computer science GCSE exams are over, and it's now going for the bundles people are buying this week for September. Now my subjects exam's over, so people do buy seasonally. I don't tend to personally create a lot of things for like Valentine's Day or Mother's Day, because I'm going more for secondary, but primary I know that they prove quite popular for primary schools, but it's not something that I specialise in, these special days. But I do know that revision just before the exams happens, the quizzes and fun activities for the end of year, Christmas stuff sells particularly well, and obviously the bundles and stuff for the beginning of the year, the September, people gearing up for what's about to happen to everyone.
Great. Do we have any questions coming in?
Yes, we do. I skipped one, it seems. Someone is asking, some of my resources have been copied by others and resold. How do I protect this?
Oh, that's a nasty. It's horrible when it happens. I've had it happen to me. I had an author, and they even stole my terms and conditions.
Wow.
And referred to themselves as having her moral rights, even though it was a man. So it's fairly obvious. It's nasty when that happens. You just got to report it, really. You can't stop people if they're determined to do it, but you can report it and make it so it's really awkward for them, and they know it doesn't last if they do that. They don't build up a good reputation. You can put your own branding on it, you can put your own name on it, but if someone's determined to, then they'll still do that. But it's not happened that often maybe my stuff's just not the things that people want to copy. But it doesn't happen an awful lot to me.
That's it, and we've got the report a resource button, so whenever you do see this happening, we do encourage you to report those resources, so that we're aware of those situations and we can deal with them. And when we do find authors who are doing that, then we will have processes in place to deal with it.
Mm-hmm. And I have another copyright question. How can we know which images are from the internet, like Google Images, are safe to use in our publications on sale? Is acknowledgement of the usage enough?
What do you reckon to that?
Google isn't a source, that's just something that you use to find it. So you can't say that you've got it from Google Images. That's not saying where it's actually from, that's just how you found the image. You need to look at the website. When you click on an image, you can then go and see it on the website, and you can have a look at their terms and conditions. Most images that you find through Google will probably be ones that someone else owns, so you can't use them.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to go to either specialist sites or purchase them if you wanted to, but you can't just assume anything. And Google Images is a little bugbear, because maybe I'm a computer science teacher, but that is not a source, that is just what you've used to find it.
Yeah, and I think Google does have its own functionality to try and find the free to use images, but it's not always trustworthy in the same way. You have to go to the source of that image and make sure what the source of that image actually says about the terms of use of that image. We do have a piece of advice on this on the Author Academy, if you've not visited it. We have a copyright section in the Author Academy which can give you lots of hints and tips about where to find images that you can use, and also about what images you can't use. And Flora, if you could put on the chat the actual link to the Author Academy, that would be really useful. Do we have any other questions coming in, or shall I move back to our list?
You can move back to your list.
Great. I appreciate we've gone about 10 minutes over the time that we said, so if you do have to leave, as I said, don't worry, we are recording this, but we will just answer the final couple of questions before we finish. So, is it more difficult to sell resources to a niche subject, so a subject that has less demand?
I would consider computer science is a niche subject. It's become compulsory at Key Stage 3, but I think a lot of computer science teachers think they can create resources because they've got the IT skills to do it, so maybe they wouldn't think of buying them so often. But I think if you're a niche subject, there's less authors who you're in competition with. I think it's harder if you're trying to do primary maths, for instance, or English. There's so many resources out there. You're fighting in a huge ocean of resources to be found. I think it's slightly easier being a niche subject because when people search, then it doesn't get refreshed every few seconds with another resource being added. So if I upload something and someone does the clicking method to find it, so for instance they would click on secondary, then computing, then that seems to be sorted more in date order with the newest one at the top. And I think if I've uploaded something, unless I'm very unlucky and someone else has uploaded 20 things that day, I've got a good day or day and a half sometimes before I get knocked off that first page, just because there's less people uploading. I think on a popular subject that would get refreshed so often that you wouldn't be seen.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, while it might be that the market is smaller for those resources, there's still a demand for them, and because there's less being made, there's less to choose from, and it means you're more likely to be found. So the final question we've got here, is there a big benefit to using the video previews?
I think so. I think it's really helped because I was getting questions from people about what was included in my new style lessons that I've been creating, and they wanted to know a bit more. And so I think it has helped them, because I'm certainly getting less questions now. People know exactly what's in it, and I think I'm getting more views and more sales because people feel a bit more confident in the resource.
Fantastic. Well, unless we have any more questions coming in. No, fantastic. So thank you ever so much for attending our first webinar. I hope it's been very informative. And thank you very much, Nichola, for giving up your time to come and deliver this. We will look to have more future events of this type, which we will deliver some similar types of information. Hopefully some of the information that we might be covering in the future Author Train Author events. But please do look at coming along to our next one in Sheffield. We will be holding one in London later in the year, but the date is not decided for that yet. So thank you very much for attending, and we hope to see you soon. Goodbye.